Between 1941 and 1945, the United States accomplished what seemed impossible. American factories produced 300,000 aircraft, 88,000 tanks, 3,000 naval ships, 2.6 million machine guns, and 41 billion rounds of ammunition. This wasn't just manufacturing, it was the greatest industrial mobilization in human history. The story of how America's factories, shipyards, and assembly lines became the arsenal of democracy is a tale of innovation, determination, and economic might on an unprecedented scale. Today we're exploring how American industrial power didn't just support the war effort, it won the war. In 1940, the United States had a smaller military than Romania. The American military ranked 17th in the world, with an army of just 175,000 soldiers and an industrial base focused entirely on consumer goods. But American industrial capacity was dormant, not absent. The automobile industry alone had the capability to produce millions of vehicles annually, capacity that could be rapidly converted to military production. When President Roosevelt called for America to become the arsenal of democracy, he wasn't making an empty promise. He was awakening an industrial giant. The transformation began even before America formally entered the conflict. The lend-lease program, initiated in March 1941, allowed American factories to produce weapons for Britain and other allies. This served dual purposes. It supported nations fighting the Axis powers, while simultaneously ramping up American production capacity and training workers in military manufacturing. By the time Pearl Harbor was attacked in December 1941, thousands of American factories were already operating on wartime schedules, producing military equipment around the clock. The conversion of America's automobile industry was the cornerstone of industrial mobilization. General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler halted civilian car production entirely in February 1942. Not a single passenger vehicle would be manufactured until 1945. These massive factories, with their sophisticated assembly lines and skilled workforces, were retooled for military production. Ford's Willow Run plant alone would produce one B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes at peak production. The Chrysler Corporation converted its automobile plants to produce M3 and M4 tanks at the Detroit Arsenal tank plant. What made this transformation remarkable wasn't just the speed, it was the scale. American tank production in 1941 was 4,052 vehicles. By 1943, that number had exploded to 29,497 tanks in a single year. The same assembly line techniques that had made automobiles affordable were now making tanks, trucks, and armored vehicles at a rate that staggered both allies and enemies. This conversion required a complete reimagining of the American workforce. With millions of men joining the military, women entered the factories in unprecedented numbers. Rosie the Riveter became the symbol of this transformation, but the reality was even more impressive than the propaganda. By 1943, women comprised 65% of the aircraft industry workforce and 30% of workers in shipyards. They operated complex machinery, performed precision welding, and assembled intricate aircraft components, jobs that had been considered exclusively male just years earlier. The Liberty ship program represents perhaps the most impressive achievement in maritime construction history. These standardized cargo vessels were designed for rapid mass production, using techniques borrowed from automobile manufacturing. American shipyards would eventually produce 2,710 Liberty ships between 1941 and 1945, an average of more than 2 ships per day for the entire war period. The secret was modular construction. Liberty ships were built from prefabricated sections, manufactured inland, and transported to coastal shipyards for final assembly. This allowed work to proceed simultaneously on hundreds of ships in various stages of completion. Welding replaced traditional riveting, making construction faster and hulls stronger. The use of standardized components meant that any shipyard could build or repair any Liberty ship, a logistical advantage of immense importance. The speed records achieved were astounding. The SS Robert E. Peary was constructed in just 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes from keel laying to launch, a feat that seems impossible even by modern standards. While this was an exceptional demonstration rather than standard practice, average construction time dropped from 230 days in 1941 to just 42 days by 1943. This meant that ships were being built faster than German submarines could sink them, ensuring that supplies continued flowing to Europe and the Pacific. American aircraft production achieved numbers that seemed fantastical. In 1939, American factories produced fewer than 6,000 aircraft total. By 1944, they were producing more than 96,000 aircraft in a single year, an increase of over 1,500%. The Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, one of the conflict's most important bombers, was produced at a rate of 16 aircraft per day at peak production across multiple facilities. The Ford Motor Company's Willow Run facility embodied the scale of American aviation production. This single plant, covering 3.5 million square feet, employed 42,000 workers operating 24 hours a day. The assembly line stretched over a mile in length, with components entering at one end and completed bombers emerging at the other. Henry Ford applied his automotive assembly line philosophy to aircraft construction, breaking down the complex B-24 bomber into manageable sub-assemblies that could be built by semi-skilled workers. What truly distinguished American aircraft production was flexibility. Factories could switch between aircraft types or incorporate design modifications without halting production. When the P-51 Mustang proved superior to earlier fighters, production ramped up rapidly across multiple facilities. When the B-29 Superfortress required new manufacturing techniques due to its unprecedented complexity, American industry adapted within months. This flexibility meant that American air forces always had access to the most effective aircraft designs in quantities that overwhelmed opposition. Behind the finished weapons was a supply chain of staggering complexity. Producing a single B-24 bomber required 450,000 separate parts from 15,000 different suppliers. A Sherman tank needed components from over 8,000 companies. Coordinating this web of suppliers, ensuring quality control, and maintaining production schedules required innovations in logistics and management that would reshape American business practices for decades. American railroads moved over 90% of military freight, operating on schedules coordinated by the newly created Office of Defense Transportation. Specialized rail cars were designed to transport tanks, aircraft fuselages, and artillery pieces. The railroad system itself was expanded and modernized, with new classification yards built to handle the unprecedented volume of military traffic. By 1944, American railroads were moving twice as much of freight as in 1939, despite having essentially the same number of locomotives and cars, a testament to improved efficiency and organization. The logistics extended to storage and distribution. Massive depot complexes were built across the country, storing everything from ammunition to spare parts to medical supplies. The Red River Arsenal in Texas covered 20,000 acres and employed 15,000 workers producing and storing ammunition. The Norfolk Naval Base complex expanded to handle the massive increase in naval traffic. These facilities represented a permanent expansion of American military infrastructure that would prove valuable for decades. American industrial might wasn't just about quantity, it was about rapid innovation. The proximity fuse, developed in secret collaboration between government and private industry, revolutionized anti-aircraft warfare. This miniature radar system could fit inside an artillery shell and detonate automatically near enemy aircraft, dramatically improving effectiveness. The fuse required 32 precision parts in a package that had to withstand the shock of being fired from a cannon, a manufacturing challenge solved through cooperation between industry and research institutions. When Japan's conquest of Southeast Asia cut off 90% of America's natural rubber supply, American chemists and engineers responded by creating a synthetic rubber industry from scratch. Within 2 years, over 50 facilities were producing synthetic rubber at a rate exceeding pre-war natural rubber imports. This achievement required innovations in chemistry, engineering, and manufacturing that would have lasting peacetime applications. By 1945, synthetic rubber production exceeded 1 million tons annually. Radar technology, still experimental in 1940, became a mass-produced commodity, thanks to American manufacturing prowess. The radiation laboratory at MIT developed improved radar systems, while companies like RCA, General Electric, and Western Electric manufactured them by the thousands. American factories produced over 100,000 radar sets during the conflict, equipping ships, aircraft, and ground installations with technology that provided crucial advantages in detecting enemy forces. The Manhattan Project represented the ultimate fusion of American scientific knowledge and industrial capacity. The facilities built to produce atomic weapons were industrial complexes on an unprecedented scale. The Oak Ridge facility in Tennessee covered over 70,000 acres and employed 75,000 workers at its peak. The electromagnetic separation plants alone consumed more electricity than many entire states, requiring the construction of dedicated power infrastructure. The Hanford site in Washington state built massive plutonium production reactors along the Columbia River. These weren't laboratory experiments, they were industrial-scale chemical processing facilities designed to produce weapons-grade plutonium in quantity. The construction required 45,000 workers and was completed in under 2 years, a time frame that seemed impossible for such a complex and novel undertaking. What made the Manhattan Project remarkable from an industrial perspective wasn't just the science. It was that American industry could build facilities for processes that had never been done before, at scales never attempted, while maintaining absolute secrecy. Companies like DuPont, General Electric, and Union Carbide designed and operated plants using theoretical processes that existed only on paper, achieving success through a combination of scientific brilliance and manufacturing expertise that no other nation could match. American industrial power extended beyond weapons to food production. While other nations faced starvation, American farms produced enough to feed not only the domestic population and military, but also allied nations. This agricultural miracle was itself a product of industrial mechanization. The number of tractors on American farms increased dramatically, replacing horses and manual labor. Chemical fertilizers produced by repurposed industrial facilities dramatically increased yields. The canning industry expanded massively to produce military rations. new preservation techniques were developed and vast food processing facilities were built. The American military consumed 15 billion pounds of food annually at peak, all of which had to be processed, packaged, and shipped around the world. Spam, canned vegetables, powdered eggs, and other preserved foods became synonymous with American logistics, often mocked by soldiers but envied by every other nation's military. Control of petroleum resources and refining capacity gave America an insurmountable advantage. The United States produced over 60% of the world's oil during this period, and American refineries were the most advanced in the world. The capacity to produce high-octane aviation fuel gave American aircraft performance, advantages that couldn't be matched by nations using lower-grade fuels. To move petroleum from fields in Texas and Oklahoma to refineries and ports on the East Coast, America built the Big Inch and Little Inch pipelines, at the time the longest petroleum pipelines in the world. Completed in just 2 years despite material shortages and labor constraints, these pipelines moved over 300 million barrels of oil, freeing tanker ships for other uses. This infrastructure project demonstrated American ability to execute massive engineering projects while simultaneously conducting a global conflict. Electrical power generation expanded dramatically to support industrial production. New power plants were built, existing facilities were expanded, and electrical grids were interconnected to ensure reliable power for critical war industries. The total installed electrical generating capacity increased by over 50% during the war years, ensuring that factories could operate around the clock without power shortages that plagued other industrial nations. Converting millions of civilians into skilled industrial workers required the largest training program in American history. The government and industry partnered to create training schools that taught welding, machining, aircraft assembly, and countless other skills. These weren't multi-year apprenticeships. They were intensive programs lasting weeks or months, using innovative teaching methods to compress years of traditional training into crash courses. The industrial mobilization broke down social barriers that had seemed permanent. African Americans moved from agricultural work in the South to high-paying factory jobs in northern and western cities in what became known as the Great Migration. While discrimination persisted, the desperate need for workers opened opportunities that had been previously closed. Similarly, older workers, disabled individuals, and other groups traditionally excluded from industrial work found employment in war industries. To enable women with children to work in factories, many facilities established on-site childcare centers, an innovation that was decades ahead of its time. Some factories provided cafeterias, healthcare facilities, and even housing assistance to attract and retain workers. These worker-friendly policies demonstrated that industrial productivity increased when workers' needs were met, lessons that would influence post-war labor relations. American industry achieved something remarkable: mass production without sacrificing quality. Statistical quality control methods, developed in the 1920s but little used, became standard practice in war industries. Inspectors used precision measuring tools to ensure parts met exacting specifications. Rejected components were analyzed to identify and correct manufacturing problems. This attention to quality meant that American equipment was reliable in the field, reducing maintenance requirements and increasing combat effectiveness. The standardization extended beyond individual components to entire systems. Artillery shells, ammunition, spare parts, all were manufactured to specifications so precise that parts from one factory could be used in equipment from another. This interchangeability was a massive, logistical advantage, allowing rapid repairs in field conditions and efficient distribution of spare parts. It also meant that multiple factories could produce identical items, providing redundancy if any facility was damaged or needed to shift production. Financing this industrial mobilization required unprecedented government spending and innovative financing mechanisms. War bonds sold to ordinary citizens raised billions of dollars while simultaneously controlling inflation by absorbing excess purchasing power. These bonds weren't just financial instruments, they were symbols of national unity, with celebrities promoting bond drives and citizens viewing bond purchases as patriotic duty. The federal budget increased from $9 billion in 1939 to $98 billion by 1945, a more than tenfold increase. Yet inflation remained relatively controlled thanks to price controls, rationing, and the absorption of excess money through bond sales and taxation. The government established the War Production Board to allocate resources, prioritize production, and prevent wasteful competition between manufacturers. This central planning, unusual in American economic history, proved remarkably effective in coordinating the complex industrial mobilization. Corporate profits were regulated but not eliminated, providing incentive for efficient production while preventing war profiteering. The cost-plus contracting system guaranteed manufacturers a modest profit above costs, encouraging rapid production without concern for economic losses from untested designs or manufacturing processes. This system worked because of robust oversight and the patriotic atmosphere that made excessive profiteering socially unacceptable. American industrial production didn't just supply American forces. It supplied allies worldwide through lend-lease and other programs. The Soviet Union received 400,000 trucks, 12,000 armored vehicles, 11,000 aircraft, and vast quantities of food, fuel, and raw materials. Britain received similar support. This meant that American factories were effectively outfitting multiple nations' militaries simultaneously, a feat no other country could attempt. The numbers are staggering: 2,000 locomotives and 11,000 rail cars to the Soviet Union to rebuild their transportation infrastructure. Enough food to provide 15 million Soviet citizens with daily rations. Entire factories were disassembled, shipped overseas, and reassembled to produce equipment locally. American industrial power multiplied the effectiveness of Allied nations by providing the tools they needed to fight effectively. This support was strategic as well as humanitarian. Every tank supplied to the Soviet Union was one that fought German forces on the Eastern Front. Every aircraft delivered to Britain was one that bombed German industry or defended against air attacks. American industrial production created a force multiplication effect where Allied nations could focus their industrial capacity on areas where they had advantages while relying on American production to fill gaps. The industrial mobilization permanently transformed American industry and society. Manufacturing techniques developed for war production found peacetime applications. Welding technologies, quality control methods, mass production techniques all became standard industrial practices. The workforce that had been trained in advanced manufacturing didn't simply disappear when the conflict ended. These skilled workers became the foundation of post-war American prosperity. The infrastructure built during the mobilization, airports, ports, roads, power plants, factories, remained valuable assets in peacetime. Many wartime industrial facilities were converted to civilian production, while others became the foundation of the military-industrial complex that would characterize the Cold Era. The organizational and management techniques developed to coordinate vast industrial enterprises, influenced American business for generations. Perhaps most importantly, the mobilization demonstrated what American industry could achieve when fully committed to a goal. The same industrial might that produced weapons could produce consumer goods, build infrastructure, and raise living standards. The confidence gained from this accomplishment shaped American economic and foreign policy for decades, establishing the United States as the world's preeminent industrial power. The story of how American industrial power won the conflict is ultimately about the transformation of an entire nation. In 1939, America had a peacetime economy focused on domestic consumption. By 1945, it had become the arsenal of democracy, producing more war material than all other nations combined. This wasn't just about having more factories or more workers, it was about organizing those resources with unprecedented efficiency and effectiveness. The numbers tell part of the story: 300,000 aircraft, 88,000 tanks, 3,000 ships, billions of rounds of ammunition. But the real story is about the people, the women who learned to weld, the engineers who designed production systems, the managers who coordinated complex supply chains, the workers who put in overtime to meet production quotas. It's about a nation that mobilized its full industrial capacity in service of a common goal. American industrial power didn't just supply weapons, it provided the foundation for victory. While battles were won by soldiers, sailors, and airmen, those service members fought with equipment produced in American factories, transported by American ships and trains, fueled by American petroleum, and supported by American logistics. The industrial mobilization was as crucial to victory as any military campaign. The lessons of this industrial mobilization remain relevant today. It demonstrated that industrial capacity, properly organized and motivated, can accomplish what seems impossible. It showed that innovation flourishes under pressure, that social barriers can be overcome when necessary, and that a nation united in purpose can achieve extraordinary things. The arsenal of democracy didn't just win a conflict, it demonstrated the power of industrial might combined with national will. A demonstration that echoes through history and continues to influence how we think about industrial capacity, national security, and economic power.